Okay, so I'm joined today with the Attorney-General, and we're very pleased to say that the final report of the Women's Safety and Justice Taskforce has just been handed to the Attorney-General. I thank Justice McMurdo and everyone who's been involved. It was only in May that we committed $363 million in addressing the recommendations of this report, and that includes making coercive control a crime. Coercive control, of course, we know is a major contributing factor to so many issues out there in the community. We've already allocated $106 million to improving safety for victims and attending court and expanding specialist DV courts. And of course, we have co-responder models for police have also been established. I want to pay special tribute to the 700 people who made submissions to the report. It is, I believe, the most comprehensive report of its kind ever to be undertaken in Australia. It has resulted in 174 recommendations. Now, the report has only just been handed to government. We have not read the report yet, but we will be considering that at Cabinet in the very near future. So I want to thank everybody for being involved in that. So I'll hand over to the Attorney-General in a moment, but I also want to reflect on another major electoral reform that comes into place today. It's historic, and it means that public funding is increased and limits put on political donations. So political donations will now be capped at $6,000 for candidates and for the same party, and $4,000 for parties. So this means the end of big business fundraising. This is fundamental, it is nation-leading, and it comes into force today. So today I've also written to the State Secretary of the Australian Labor Party saying that no Cabinet Minister will be participating in the Queensland Business Partnership Network, and there'll be no Queensland Business Partnership Network, which is the Business Observers Program, at ALP state conferences. So this is landmark, and I just want everyone to realise how important this integrity reform is. And the challenge now is for the Leader of the Opposition to absolutely commit to the same rules that we are standing by today.
Just before you go, 6,000 for each candidate and
yes.
4,000 for the party, is that electorate?
Yes.
So 10,000,
is
10,000 in each electorate?
Is the maximum. Is that correct, Shannon? Yep.
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 In each electorate?
Yep.
Yes,
so the days.
Any one person can donate.
Yeah.
No, so that's it. Total.
Total.
Not for each. Not
Total.
For each electorate.
Total over an electoral cycle. So this is the end of the big business fundraising activities that have existed for many, many years. So the public funding will be coming in, and this is fantastic news that operates commencing from today.
I'm sorry. If there's an election on Saturday, only $10,000 can be donated by one particular business to that campaign.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's historic. It's absolutely historic. So there's that. Okay, and finally, can I also just wish the Governor well? The Governor has just put out a tweet that she has COVID. So many other people across the state have it as well. There's over 550 people currently in hospital, but I know that Queenslanders would also like to pass on their best wishes as well to the Governor. Okay, I'll hand over to Shannon.
Thank you, Premier. A little while ago I met with the Honourable Margaret McMurdo to receive the second report, Hear Her Voice, which focuses on sexual assault and women's experience in the criminal justice system. I want to thank the Honourable Margaret McMurdo and the expert panel that have looked at women's experience in the criminal justice system. We know that 1 in 5 Australian women will experience sexual assault, yet it is the most underreported crime. How do we actually get more and more women to come forward so that they're not re-traumatised by the criminal justice system and we see more access to justice for victim survivors? I also want to thank all of the brave women that came forward to share their story. And again, you know, your legacy will be that we have heard you and we have listened to you, and now we are acting to overhaul the system, to place victims, survivors at the centre. As the Premier has said, work is already underway to implement the first report with a $363 million package. We will now consider all of the recommendations, and there are many of them. And again, I want to thank the Taskforce and the women that came forward to have their say. This is significant reform. As the Premier has said, we are criminalising coercive control, we are expanding specialist courts, we are expanding co-responder models, we are expanding respectful relationships. Some of the recommendations in here go to significant law reform around consent and mistake of fact, and how we actually run a campaign in the community to educate people about what consent means so that we see less sexual assaults. There is also a number of recommendations about modernising language in the criminal code, which I think is well overdue, again, as well as making sure that we are doing all we can to prevent sexual assault by working with young people around education. And there are also a number of recommendations in here around women in custody. Almost 90% of women in custody have experienced some sort of violence themselves. So how do we end that cycle of violence, and what support can we give women in the criminal justice system to rehabilitate? This is a really landmark report, and I'm very proud that the Premier and the government asked the Honourable Margaret McMurdo to do this important work. Happy to take questions.
In terms of the recommendation around forensic medical examination, one of the big hurdles is staffing issues and not enough staff trained in this. Given that there's a shortage of clinicians around ill health, how are we going to be implementing this recommendation?
So I know the Minister for Health is already working on this, and of course we have our Commission of Inquiry into the forensics unit. So we'll continue to work with Health to make sure that we do have enough specially trained people to take forensic tests when women come forward.
Were you aware that women were having to travel hundreds of kilometres to be accessing rape kits?
I am aware that some women have had issues at hospitals to be able to access forensic testing. Having sat on a sexual assault board for 10 years before entering Parliament, I know even women in Logan sometimes had trouble when there weren't specialist staff available. We want to make sure that when women come forward, no matter where they are in Queensland, they get the forensic testing they need for a successful prosecution of a sexual assault, and we'll absolutely be working with the Minister for Health on that.
The government was made aware of these problems back in 2019 in the audit report. Why is it taking years to act?
Well, I understand the Health Minister is already implementing changes in relation to making sure that there are specialist staff across the HHSs.
But the uptake of that's been slow, the reports there.
So we need to double our efforts to make sure that no matter where women are in Queensland, they can access forensic testing.
There's also a recommendation for a new model within the DPP for the prosecution of sexual offences. Do you have any details or any insight on what that might look like?
Look, I think it's about making sure that, again, where you are dealing with sexual assault cases, you have people that are specially trained in trauma. Coming forward after a sexual assault is incredibly difficult, and right now the criminal justice system adds to the trauma when victim survivors come forward. So we want to make sure that there are specialist teams within the DPP who have been trained, who understand trauma, and there is already efforts underway to make sure that we have great victim liaisons at our Director of Public Prosecutions, but again, more needs to be done. There are more resources in this year's budget for prosecutors and lawyers at the DPP and for training to make sure that our DPP can really support victims through this process.
There are still issues with women coming forward and actually reporting crimes. How do we tackle that?
Well, if we have a system that can lessen the trauma on women as they come forward, my hope is that more women will come forward and report. As I said, it is one of the most underreported crimes. So if we have a system that can wrap support around women, where they have victim liaisons that can help them navigate the system. One of the recommendations is for a special sexual assault list in our courts so that our judges are trained, that there is more support at court. I think together these recommendations will provide a system that is trauma-informed and places victims, survivors at the centre, and I'm hopeful that that means more women will come forward.
Do you support offenders or people that are charged with crimes being named?
Well, that is one of the key recommendations, that perpetrators for sexual assault can be named. Like most charges now, perpetrators can be named, but when it comes to sexual assault and rape, they can't be. The Taskforce says it's time to change that, so government will look closely at that recommendation.
what the report highlights too is that one of the biggest challenges is the community perception of sexual assault. How do you tackle that?
Absolutely, and there are some really great parts to this report, and I've only just seen it, but just flicking through it, that talks about the rape myths that still exist in our community. So we have to do more to work with the community to make sure that people understand when a woman comes forward and reports sexual assault, we need to believe her. And so anything we can do as government to partner with community on prevention campaigns, education and awareness about consent, and believing women when they come forward will make a real difference. Because let's not forget, juries sit on sexual assault cases. So we need everyone in our community to understand these rape myths and myths around sexual assault so that we can actually better deliver justice for victims.
So Tony, the changes to mistake of fact laws happened last year. There's some recommendations in this. How will it be different in the law changes?
So the Taskforce report recommends that we change that consent must be freely and voluntarily given to freely and voluntarily agreed to. So this is further strengthening our consent and mistake of fact laws. As you said, the Queensland Law Reform Commission several years ago looked at this and made some recommendations which we adopted. But I think the community really has come a long way in the last few years, and I think that's testament to the fact that we have had women marching the streets saying enough is enough when it comes to sexual assault. So I'm really pleased that the Taskforce has taken the time to hear from women and the legal community and determined that we can go further, and they have made those recommendations.
Will defendants still be able to rely on mistake of fact?
So they have, from what I can see, they have recommended changes to mistake of fact, but they have made some changes to how that operates so that a mistake of fact would not be reasonable if the defendant did not do or say anything to try and ascertain whether or not consent was given. So it is strengthening the law around mistake of fact and bringing it more into line with some of the changes that we've seen in New South Wales and Victoria. It does go a little bit further than some of those jurisdictions. In fact, in their recommendations, it does say that if a complainant suffers grievous bodily harm, it is taken that consent was not agreed to, which I think is a very good thing.
Sorry, can I just go back to the political donations? Okay, keep going. We've got the
Yes.
by 11.
Sorry,
Yeah.
with this report, it's big. When will Cabinet be considering it for the end of the year or September?
I would hope that we'd be able to consider it within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Any other questions for me?
Premier, just to clarify
Yes.
from yesterday,
Yes.
in terms of the 2024 election,
Yes.
do you intend on contesting?
I have informed the caucus today that I intend to take this team to the next election, absolutely. And the people of Queensland will decide whether or not they want a government that's focused on them and focused on delivering services, or whether they want an opposition that is yet to provide any alternative policies to the people of this state.
Contrary to what your spokesman said to us yesterday, Premier, that you were undecided.
I clarified it. I'm sorry I misinterpreted Lane's question, and I just wanted it to be on the public record today so everybody is 100% clear. I love this job, I love the people of this state, and the people of this state give me energy every single day to do this job, to look after them and to take this state to the next stage.
Do you regret not issuing an apology to those public servants yesterday?
What I'd like to say to any public servant who has been bullied, I do apologise for that, I do. And let me also put on the public record, I probably wasn't as clear yesterday as I should have been, that the report is serious. Of course we take it seriously. That is why I have accepted every single one of those recommendations. I saw those comments today. Look, let me make it very clear that people provided comments to Mr Coldrake in confidence, and they will remain confidential.
No, you agree that it was coming from people with anti-Labor agenda?
Definitely not. People are free to make their own comments, and we respect the confidentiality of people coming forward and putting their views to Peter Coldrake.
The LNP is calling for him to be stripped of his assistant minister role.
No.
Should he be?
No.
Just back to the political donations.
Yes,
Why
that's
do we-
within one term. Those caps.
Why the need to cap?
Sorry.
Why are you doing it?
Well, no, this was actually passed through legislation, Lane. Yeah, so this takes effect from today.
Oh, I got you.
Yes,
So
yeah, so it's the legislation. It's the huge electoral reforms that we passed, and they come into... Today's the day. Today's the historic day.
I'll rip up my check then.
Premier, just on Bruce Saunders again, why shouldn't he be stripped of his assistant ministerial responsibilities? Hasn't he dismissed the seriousness of the report through his comments?
Bruce is Bruce, but look, I'm making it very clear that the confidentiality has to be respected. Okay.
How does it stand with Coldrake's points about Mr. Boris?
Sorry.
How does it stand with Coldrake's points about Mr. Boris?
I stand by the report. I stand by the recommendations, and I'll be ensuring that all of our assistant ministers are also briefed on Coldrake as well.
Do you believe the Paul Palaszczuk bridge should retain that name?
Do I believe?
Well,
It's not. It's a matter for the Ipswich City Council. However, do I support that bridge being named after Paul Palaszczuk? No, I do not. Okay.
What do you say from the stuff on the donation caps accusations that it's a financial gerrymander, given that unions aren't going to be under the same rules as other?
This all went through Parliament. It is the most comprehensive suite of electoral reforms, and the challenge now is to see if the LNP actually follows suit. So the question today for them is, are they going to cancel their business partnership programs?
And one also on the Triple C, Bruce Barber being appointed, how come it's only a 3-year term?
Yeah, Attorney, can you answer that? Yeah.
Yep, I can.
Thank you.
Thank you. The government put Mr Barber forward, which I think is wonderful. He'll be a great candidate. He's been acting in the role. And we put a 5-year term to the PCCC. The PCCC came back and said they would not support Bruce Barber to remain as chair to take on the role unless it was a 3-year term. Now, there has been a bit of back and forth with the PCCC on this, and I can tell you that the chair of the PCCC, as late as yesterday, said to me there was no bipartisan support for Mr Barber unless it was a 3-year term. Now, under Section 228 of the Crime and Corruption Act, we have to have bipartisan support for the nomination. And I am informed by the clerk that the term of the appointment has always formed part of the nomination in the last few appointments.
The Labor MPs back to 5 years.
Yes, they did.
Back to 3.
Yes, they did, despite the Leader of the Opposition standing up on Tuesday answering your question, saying that he would support a 5-year term. Coldrake said we need 5-year terms for Directors General to ensure their independence, and I think, of course, the same should go for the chair of the CCC. So this is another example of the LNP saying something and doing something completely different.
Has the PCCC actually voted on it?
Yes, they have, and the government members voted for a 5-year term and the LNP members voted for a 3-year term. And again, it was made very clear to me by the PCCC that any other term would not be given bipartisan support, and therefore, under the legislation, we could not appoint Mr Barber.
So it has to be unanimous.
It has to be bipartisan, so there has to be at least some support from both parties. The government wanted 5 years in accordance with Coldrake, the LNP did not.
Why do you think that is?
You would have to ask the LNP, Lydia, but maybe they think that they can appoint their own chair if they win the next election, which shows me they don't want independence in this role at all.
Premier, who will the next Integrity Commission be, and when will their term start?
They are in the process of finalising that at the moment. I know there's the recruitment process happening. So, look, as soon as we know, we'll let you know.
Dr. Stefanoff finishes on Sunday, though. Will we be left without an integrity?
No, there'll be someone acting until the permanent appointment.
Who will that be?
I don't have that on me, but I'll let you know as soon as that's finalised.
Dr. Stefanoff had volunteered to stay on in an acting role.
No, there's an acting person has already been signed off. I just don't have the name on me. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely weekend.